Coming to you from Rockingham, IPL Radio.
And it is about 20 past 11, and we're very honoured to have a special guest in the studio with us. Peter Hudson, you're no stranger to IPL. You've been here a few times, eh?
That's right, Tris. Yeah, it's great to be back with you, and it's the second time I've been in the studio since the great move over to Dixon Road. So it's great to see this place really coming together and turning into the traditional radio studio that we love and see all over the state. So it's great to be back, and of course, even though I do a fair bit of media across WA on telly and across radio, it's always a pleasure to come back and speak with IPL. It's where I started all of those years ago. My first media appearance, I think, was with IPL. And glad to be continuing the tradition with you.
Awesome. It's great to have you back in. And so I think you were in a few weeks ago, right? And obviously we've done a few more stuff since then. So was it 2 or 3 years ago when we interviewed you first?
Yeah, the first tilt. So that was in the lead up to the 22 federal election.
That's right, when you took on Madeleine King.
That's right, yeah. So that was for the federal electorate of Brand. So that would have been the first time we spoke, I suspect. Leaning back on my memory, would have been March of 2022, sometime around that point in time. It was a long time ago. I've managed to fit a fair bit in the last 2 years. Forgive me for not having the data up in my mind. But yeah, it was easily. We've been on and off the air between the two of us and Nick and a few others for a good 2.5 years now. That's
awesome. And we kind of followed your career. So obviously you did the Brand election. And I was just saying to Mitch earlier on, I felt that at the time you got quite a lot of undue criticism about your age. Do you mind sharing how old you are? Or was that
at the time I was 20.
20.
For the most of the campaign proper, I was 20.
And that's very young to be taking on a safe seat like Brand, you know. And I thought it was very unfair, given that there's a lot of talk about younger people not engaging in politics. And so, you know, the older guard are constantly saying, you know, we need new young blood, we need new young people. And then when you put your hat forward and took on Madeleine King, I think you got a lot of respect from, you know, the people. But I think that criticism of you was unfair. I mean, as a 20-year-old to stand in Brand, I thought that was incredibly brave. And we shouldn't be creating barriers for young people.
Look, I totally agree. And there's a couple of angles that I often discuss when it comes to this point, because, yes, there is a factor that with age comes experience. And, when I put my hand up for the seat of Brand, I was fresh out of uni and, looking at graduate things and things like that. So it's safe to say my experience in the private sector hadn't been as illustrious as it is now. But, I mean, look, we are always saying we need more young people in politics. I say that to people who are younger than me. It's like, you need to get involved in politics, because young people will inherit the earth. And if you want to see change in your community, you need to be the change. Otherwise, who else is going to do it? There's no one else who's going to put their hand up to represent young people other than the young people that actually care about what they're doing. And yeah, look, I mean, there is always a fair bit of criticism, but I suspect that if I had been 40 years old when I put my hand up for Brand, then they could have turned around and said, oh, he's getting on, but I've never seen him out and about in the public life before, so what's he been doing for the last 20 years, sort of thing. So, I mean, it'll be a fact that if and when I'm running at the age of 40, then they won't be able to say I've done nothing. So I've been keeping myself busy and keeping very engaged since a young age. And, you know, that's something that I'm passionate about and something I want to continue and pass on to the next generation, particularly young women. Getting more young women involved in politics is something I think that's hugely important. It's a massively critical issue to the future of the political discourse in Australia, and something that, you know, if I'm not there pushing from behind to get people up into that space, who else is going to do it?
And I think for young people, especially like you said, young women, the numbers of people voting for young people is abysmal. You know, like, young people have the vision, they have the compassion, they have the passion to see change, and yet the numbers of people young in that age group that don't vote, it is appalling. Like, if you're not going to vote, basically whoever gets in, you have no right to argue. You know, that is your right to vote however way you want to vote. Use that vote, make it count. But unfortunately, a lot of young people just don't engage.
Yeah, you're right. There is a serious apathy from young people towards the political system generally. And the other aspect that I see of, okay, maybe they don't vote at all. The almost the bigger issue in my mind is when young people just vote the way that their parents tell them to, or the way that their parents have always voted. And I think that's something that has been, it's been reported to me by voters on the ground in this area, that is a huge issue, even in our own community, of, mum and dad always voted Labor, so I'm just going to vote Labor. I can't really be bothered looking into it. Politics is all a bit beyond me. Young people are brought up being told that lawyers and politicians are generally bad people and, not to waste your time. And so when they do have to vote, because we have compulsory voting, they say, I'll just go the way that mum and dad did. And their mum and dad who came out from the UK did the same thing for a particular party. And it goes both ways to an extent. I think that's a big issue of people not engaging with their system and understanding what is the offering from, particularly I'm speaking about both major parties when it comes to elections, because they are the parties of government. What are both major parties offering? What do the local candidates stand for? Have you met them? Have you seen them around? And do you actually believe in why they're standing to be your representative in the state or the federal parliament? To me, I'd love to see more young people coming out and actually investigating that, rather than just leaning, I'll scroll through Facebook or TikTok, as the case may be these days, and deciding on that.
And there's so much misinformation or misunderstanding, and I've seen it, especially the last election. There was a lot of talk on Facebook about the parties and there's this idea that Labour are for workers and Liberals are for rich people, and so if you're a worker, then you have to vote Labour. And I was trying to say, look, that's not what it's about. There's so many dimensions to that, and I was trying to kind of explain that where the Liberals sit and where the Labour sit, but there's this kind of thinking that if you're working class, then you should vote Labour. And that's just so outdated, I think, that, how do you kind of change that mindset?
Look, it's tough, and you hit the nail on the head saying it's outdated. I think it's actually quite a rusted-on perception, particularly in an area where there's a high, let's say, importation of people from the UK in that 50, 60 years ago sort of era. So what we see, let's use Brand as an example. There's a whole lot of a massive demographic who moved out here under the £10 POM scheme, who were all, not all is probably a gross stereotype, but there was a leaning towards a lot of them coming out from the union movement in the UK. And the UK Labour movement is obviously very closely linked to the trade union movement, who were fighting for the rights of workers on the ports and things like that. So this goes back more than 50 to maybe nearly 100 years ago in terms of workers' rights. And so those are people that came out in the 60s, 70s, 80s, moved into seats like Brand. We've got a very high English population in this seat. And that their perception of what the Labor Party is, even though Labor in the UK is certainly different from the Australian Labor Party, their perceptions of what Labor stands for and their association with the trade union movement has certainly stayed rusted on, probably here more than almost any other seat in the country, which is really odd, but I suppose you can put that a lot down to we've got the Kwinana industrial strip, Henderson industrial area, marine complex. So there is a lot of trade area in this seat. But it is interesting how that sort of perception has stayed really rusted on. And it's something that I've been working for a number of years, as you know, to sort of break down, because yes, I'll put my hand up and say, yeah, I'm a Liberal. But I'm as working class as it gets. I live in Waikiki. I'm not born with a silver spoon in my mouth. There's certainly no justification to say that one party stands for only this group and another party stands for only that group. Especially when we're talking about the parties of government, we have to govern for the majority of a society. You have to go for the lowest common denominator, and that is we are all Australian. So we're actually trying to govern for Australia, not for the workers or for the rich people. Those concepts are so archaic that it's laughable to even,
It's lazy thinking, isn't it?
It is very lazy thinking.
Black and white. It's just like, I'm always going to vote Labour because, like you said, my parents, my grandparents are all Labour, and they would turn in their grave if I voted for the Liberals. And it's, I was reading something that Hayley Edwards put up. People obviously, because she was Labour, then she went independent. Now she's Liberal. And people are like, oh, why have you kind of changed? And she said, well, I looked at what the Liberals believe in, and I believe, and I can get behind that. And I think that that a lot of people, if they actually sat down and looked at what Liberals believe in, would be quite surprised that, they could then vote for Liberals because it's similar to what they believe in, But we have this kind of concept that, you've got Labour for the working class and Liberals for the rich.
Well, I think a major point of difference is that the Liberal Party, in my view, and yes, I'll put my hand up and say I'm biased, but the Liberal Party is a party of aspiration, and that is, for the people who are workers, like my family always has been, who want to make a better life for themselves rather than relying on the state or the federal government to, pad the way for them. The Liberal Party sort of believe in making something of yourself and leaving a better future for your community and for your family. That's my take on the main point of difference from a community perspective is between the parties. But it always really interests me that people are set in this way of, Granddad would turn in their grave if I voted this way. But the parties have actually sort of shifted in what they believe and what they stand for and their posturing since your granddad's time. Like the Labor Party of the Hawke and Keating days are gone. They don't exist anymore. We're now in this new era of what the Labor Party is under Prime Minister Anthony Albanese and Premier Roger Cook and Rita Saffioti. This is a different beast that we're dealing with. And the same goes for the Liberal Party as well. It's always evolving, and this is the nature of politics. But to go to your point on Hayley Edwards, who is now the Liberal candidate for Rockingham, she was a member of the Labor Party. She never was a candidate. She was obviously the independent candidate during the by-election because that's what she felt was best for the community at that time. And now, after having a lengthy discussions and readings about what the Liberal Party actually stand for, she's on board with the Liberal team. And I sort of always knew that Hayley was geared that way because I understand what the Liberal Party are for. But let's take another example of someone who was like that. And voters in Brand will certainly resonate with this because Warren Mundine, who was one of the star poster guys for the No campaign against the Voice referendum, and the No vote in Brand was one of the highest in Western Australia. So Warren Mundine is a very relatable character to people in Brand. But he was actually a federal president of the Labor Party back in the day. So he was a Labor candidate. And to be the federal president of the Labor Party, that's a huge undertaking.
Yeah.
That's not your local branch secretary. That's like the top job. But even he, over time, became disillusioned with where the party was headed and did a bit of reading into the other side. And then when the Voice referendum came around, he stood on business and he said, this is not what I believe in. I believe in a better way for Australia and for Indigenous issues. And so he came to the other side and he became, along with Jacinta Price, became the leader of the No campaign across the country and has become a unifying figure for many Australians. So it certainly does happen. It can be a combination of a person doing their own research and working out what they actually believe in, or someone can know what they believe in and it's the actual parties and groups that move out from underneath them and change and evolve, which can force that shift.
And I think the Liberals have changed a lot over the last 20, 30 years, and they're much more shades to them, I guess. Back in the day, in the 50s and 60s, I guess it might have been like that. But I think that they've changed to match the kind of society we live in today. And I do think that next year's election is going to be really interesting. I do believe that the Liberals are going to do well, but obviously you guys have got a long way to come back from. Is it 2 seats you got at the moment?
Three in the for the state parliament. Yeah, so it's important to note that we've got a double barrel election next year, or most likely next year. So the state election is fixed. That's going to be on the 8th of March of 2025. The federal election is also, we're running the campaign at the same time, and that can be called any time from tomorrow right up until the middle of May next year. So that's ultimately when.
But the thinking is it's going to be around about the same time.
I suspect they won't be in the same month.
Okay.
Yeah, I think it's probably too tight for them to run state and federal elections so close to each other. The Prime Minister will also be noting the voter apathy comes around when you force people out to the polls multiple weekends in a month. People tend to get a little bit annoyed.
It wouldn't be on the same day, because wouldn't that kind of save a lot of
so it would be so fantastic if that's the case, but unfortunately the federal election is administered by the AEC, the Australian Electoral Commission, and state elections are administered by the WAEC, so the state entity of that body. So they're not actually run by the same organisation. So I can just imagine the absolute chaos if we tried to run both on the same day, and having to have state and federal flyers being handed out and people not understanding the difference is a major issue as well. So I suspect they'll avoid having them on the same day.
And I guess as well, the federals will be watching very closely, because Obviously, Labour in state and federal.
Yep.
So they'll be watching to see what kind of swings WA get to the Liberals. I think it's unlikely that Labour will take more seats. Liberals will come back fighting, but it's just how well they're going to do will determine whether you guys get power again. Have all the candidates been allocated now, or is there still some?
More or less. There's a couple that are sort of waiting in the wings and getting ready. It's a long process for a major party to go through pre-selection. So I think from my experience, it was probably 2 to 3 months from when I put my nomination in to actually getting the Facebook page and having the nice photo shoot and all these sort of things. It's a couple of months just because of all the internal party processes and vetting that has to go on. But we are more or less done in Western Australia. Federally, I think we're all done bar one seat. And at the state level, I think we've only got 3 or 4 scattered across the state who are in the process of pre-selecting those candidates. And that includes all of our seats are down this way in our patch south of the river. We're pretty much all done down here, which is really good to see.
Because I have noticed quite a few Facebook ads coming up with the Liberal candidate for whatever seat. So obviously everyone's kind of getting ready for what will be a 6-month campaign.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, some of these candidates have already been on the ground for more than 6 months. I think the first pre-selections happened in February of this year. And they've been whittling away quietly in the seats that they need to and doing the groundwork there. But yeah, I mean, other seats, it takes a bit longer for people to crop up and, get people on board and things like that. So they all sort of happen at the rate that they're supposed to. But I'm actually really pleased with the crop of candidates which we've got across the federal and the state scene in WA. There's not one that I would point out and say, oh, we could do better there. Like everyone who has put their hand up and won a pre-selection is the best person to do it. The voter's always right. And the team that we've got going forward is just phenomenal. We are in the best place to take as many seats as possible at both the state and federal level with the team we've got. We're going to have a WA-specific campaign. It's not going to be run out of the eastern states. It'll be a WA campaign for WA by WA. And so we're hoping that we're going to get that cut through, and we're just focusing on getting our candidates in front of as many people as possible so that they can give the message of the party to as many voters as possible and get them on board and get that community, like real grassroots movement going.
That's awesome. And I'm looking forward to the 6 months of seeing all the candidates, and we want to be interviewing, all the people from all the different parties to try and give listeners and viewers an opportunity to not just go, I'm going to vote this way because I always voted this way, but actually seeing who everyone stands for, and getting to know the people involved. So that's awesome. And are you going to be like a campaign manager for any of the candidates? Or
yes, is the short answer. I'm spreading myself reasonably thin this time, so I'm chairing or managing in the order of a dozen campaigns across mainly the south of the river sort of area. We've also got the new seat Bullwinkle up there, so I'm stepping in to keep a very close eye on that seat because that is one that I definitely think that we need to pick up. So I've got a couple that are north of the river and sort of east, but a majority of my patch is south of the river, which is where I'm born and grew up, and that's the sort of area that I want to run. I'm the chair, which is the liaison between headquarters, the campaign proper, and the organiser for many campaigns. And I'm also managing a couple of campaigns more closely with the on the ground sort of support that they need. So for those very complex candidates and campaigns that need additional support. So yeah, that's the easiest way to say it is I'm chairing a majority of the South Metro area. It's just it's a lot going on. So, but it's good. So it means I can keep a few eyes all over the place and make sure that all the messaging is coherent across the region, and we're actually getting the right cut through that we need in each particular seat. So it's really exciting. Probably sounds like complete boring nerd stuff to most people, but I really, really enjoy it. And campaigning, as you would know, is one of my passions.
Because I think that you did run a really good campaign last time, and all the people that have interviewed you came away going, well, I could normally vote Labour, but we got quite a few people that were voted for you because of how you kind of hold yourself, and everyone was really impressed. And even Kit Adams, who interviewed you, he ended up throwing his hat in the ring for the I think it was the local council.
Yep.
So you would have sparred with him when you went for the council, yeah?
Yeah, I don't know if sparred is the right word, but he was certainly running in the same ward as I was, and I knew him through IPL, only at a cursory glance. But I know that he's stayed involved in the affairs of local government since then. So I mean, he's another that's clearly quite passionate about delivering the best outcomes for the city. I'll say from the get-go here, I'm also a councillor for the city of Rockingham.
I was just going to get onto that.
We're
talking about everyone else.
Just to give the context. But people like Kit, and there's a whole range of it. There's about 13 candidates who I had to get up over in order to get elected to council. But I mean, all of them were of very high calibre, and to my understanding, they all really believe in Rockingham and delivering the best. And that's exactly what we need in that sparring match of local council. We need the people who believe in the best and are actually willing to work hard and fight hard to actually find those results and be innovative and think outside the box and deliver for the people.
100%. So how have you found being a councillor? Is it something that has it surprised you, or is it kind of what you thought it was going to be like?
I more or less knew what I was getting into. It's a little bit different to federal and state politics in that there's no official parties, although people certainly do seem to act along party lines a fair bit. But that's a story for another time, perhaps. But no, look, council is a fantastic ground for not only the sparring, but also the development of you as a public servant. That's effectively what we are. We're serving the city of Rockingham and the people that reside within it. And there's a whole lot that goes with that from a governance perspective, from a campaigning perspective, from a public relations or social license perspective. The one thing that I would say I have found surprising is just how much I'm enjoying the planning side of it. So I'm a very big picture thinker. I think whole macro campaigns, very overarching ideas, big thinking. And so I thought going in there, I don't know if I'll thoroughly enjoy the whole planning of, okay, we're gonna put this pub here because it's in proximity to this location and sort of things like that. But we do a lot of reading on council, but I've actually really enjoyed reading the reports and getting my head around the town planning sort of things and why we plan the things the way we do. And that's really given me a new skill in my toolbox because, I know how to campaign, I know how to message, but town planning is something that I sort of leave that for the local government guys. Well, I'm in it now. And yes, I'm surprised at how much I've enjoyed getting around that and learning a new skill. But by the same token, I love keeping myself sharp and all of those other aspects of campaigning, which I've been in for years. That's something that I really get to keep sharp and keep getting around as a local government councillor, whether that be going along to the events or furiously debating in the chambers of a council meeting, or just the usual constituent engagement. Like, it's great that I get dozens and dozens of emails every week from residents that are coming to me with things that are very important to them, and me being able to take an advocacy stance and say, okay, I'm going to stand up and ask the right questions to the right people, and I'm going to get you an outcome. Now, obviously, I'm only one councillor out of 12, so I can't always deliver exactly whatever I'd want, or else we might all have a big boat and a caravan out the front in our driveway. But at least that I can show to the people that I'm here, I'm fighting for you, I'm interested in what you have to say to me, and I will take that further to the right channels that I can. To me, that's something that's it's wholly fulfilling, and I think that's something that you really need out of councillors, is because it's not a full-time gig. You need people who find this work fulfilling and can do it almost for the love of doing it. And I think that's rare, but we do have a few really good ones in the city of Rockingham that I'm very, very pleased to be working alongside.
That's awesome. And what do you think would be the best and the worst thing about being a councillor?
Oh, okay. The best thing, I think, is the ability to make decisions that have real impact on the city. That's something that when I was running federally and even at the state level, that's what I wanted. That's why I wanted to be the member for Brand and the member for Rockingham, is because in that position I can have a real tangible outcome, a real impact on the city and the seat and what's going on, the future and the direction of the area. Same goes for local council. It looks a little bit different because we're talking local politics rather than party politics. But that is certainly the best thing, is when we have a milestone motion coming before council, we debate it and we pass it, and it's a massive thing for Rockingham that this has happened. for me, it's quite fulfilling that that I was able to have a role to play in that, of getting that decision over the line and making a real impact for Rockingham. So that, without a doubt, that's got to be the best thing. The worst thing, I don't know, you'd probably have to leave that with me for a little while, but I could say some of the arguments that we have on council, well, I shouldn't use the word argument, but we do debate. Sometimes we can debate in circles a little bit, but this is human nature.
Yeah.
And I'm someone who's very experienced in arguing and debating and being very ruthlessly logical sometimes, to the point of, okay, this is the direction we need to go in. These are the arguments, these are the points, make a decision. Not everyone is like that. Other people think differently to me. There are some very emotional thinkers. There are some very intellectual thinkers on council, and the way that they come across and debate that is very different to me. And so that, I think, can be the biggest challenge. Maybe not the worst thing about being a councillor, but the biggest challenge is managing the personalities and the ways that people approach local government. And it's not a bad thing per se, because I think it would be a bad thing if all 12 of us thought and felt and said the same things. That would
You want that
that'd be the worst for the city.
You want that diversity.
But by having so many different ideas and points of view, yes, it can create a situation where we have to adjust our approach. But I think that's probably for the betterment of the city, because there's give and take in all of that. So where I may give on one occasion, others may give to me on another occasion.
So you kind of learn to work.
Yeah.
And do you kind of like understand the personalities and the, I guess the big picture, small picture kind of types of personalities, and then work out how to kind of get around other people? Is that kind of how it works? Like, know that certain people like it in a certain way, or?
Yeah, no, there is a bit of that. I often think about, I start from a perspective of how can I bring as many people into the tent as possible. If we call the tent is the area where we're making progress for the city, where the tent is the optimal, we're doing the right thing. How can I get as many people in the tent as possible? Okay, well, she likes a rocking chair in there, and he'd like a campfire by the tent. And if I provide these things, and that's going to get these people into the tent and on side, even though she's here for a different reason and I'm here for a different reason, if we're both moving in the same direction, then we're actually achieving what we set out to do. So that's how I often approach it. And I'm a numbers guy, and I look at the numbers and say, okay, there's only 12 of us, so I need only just a little bit more than two hands to count the number of people we need on side. But yeah, I mean, I always go from a very collaborative perspective of, I'll argue passionately. I always will, but I'm very collaborative in that I don't necessarily see the need for conflict or disagreement. If I can convince you to join the tent, then I will. By the same token, they can do the same to me. I'm a very open-minded person. If your argument is sound and it's something that I can believe in and get around, then you'll have me in your tent as well. So there's give and take in all of that, but it's interesting how some people argue differently and they think differently on that. But I'm very much as I said, big picture thinker. Get them in the tent, move in the right direction. To me, it's quite simple. And other people, there's a whole lot more nuance and complexity to that. But it's something you have to navigate. It's more a people thing than a council thing. It's we all have emotions and psychology and personalities. So yeah, it's been really interesting navigating all that. But yeah,
absolutely, sounds cool. Do you have? Obviously, you went for the seat of brand a couple of years ago, and now you're on council. Do you kind of have any aspirations for state, federal in the future?
Oh, look, I can certainly suspect it's something I would be interested in. I think most people probably identified me as someone who would be good for that type of role. To be very specific on what the plan is, I mean, I've got an overarching plan, and I'll keep that to myself. It's one that I've had since I was a teenager. But, I mean, the plan goal always stays the same, but the journey looks very, very different. So, like, when I first got interested in politics, I never thought that I would have been running for the federal election at, getting pre-selected at 19 years old. That wasn't on my radar. By the same token, no one was expecting Mark McGowan to resign, so I had no expectation that I was going to be running at a state election for a by-election for Rockingham. And vice versa, I put my hand up for council, but there was no guarantee that I was going to be elected to council. So the plan stays the same, but the journey is always evolving and always changing. So, I mean, people have often asked me, and I'm on the public record in the media for this, and saying, what am I going to do next in terms of party politics? But at the moment, I'm just really passionate about delivering the best that I can on council, developing my skills and meeting new people and, gaining that experience that perhaps I was criticised for a couple of years ago when I ran. And I've gained so much experience off being on council. It's been phenomenal. But in terms of where I'm going, yes, I will be around. I'm certainly passionate about running and putting my hand up for public service, as I have in the local government capacity. When and where that will be, that's a great question. There's all of the elections I've run, I've sort of fallen into a little bit. And so I suspect the next one will be the same as well. It's, I'll be around.
Watch this space.
Yeah, it is watch this space. And I've said on the public record is I will be where I am best placed to serve the people. And that's about as much detail as I can give you without signing up to an election that I don't know that I'm going to run or win. So watch this space.
And it's an interesting, I guess a lot of the state and federal candidates or MPs did start in local politics, right? So Mark McGowan was on the Rockingham Council, wasn't he, before?
Yeah, he was.
And so it's a kind of tried and tested method that you start at local council, and then some people, I guess, that's as far as they want to go.
Yep.
But then I think there's a lot of people that go, well, I've kind of done all I can at local level. Now I want to kind of progress further, and obviously you've got youth on your side, so
absolutely. Look, I've got plenty of, as I tell people, I've got plenty of time to be a thorn in their side. So that's but not to be a little devil, but I mean, look, I sort of went the opposite way in that of people would often think of going from local government to state government or into federal government, like Mark McGowan did. He was the deputy mayor of Rockingham before he became the state member. It's a great testing ground. I sort of went the other way, going from federal to state and then to local. So I've gone in reverse. So maybe I've got to reverse that order a little bit next time going forward. But I mean, it's a great testing ground on local government, and it keeps your skills very sharp, makes you able to develop even further in your understanding of public and private sector. So I mean, certainly I think keep your eye on a few local government councils across this area, not just Rockingham, of people who are keen in that space. Going forward for state and federal politics, it's certainly a great way to get your head around all of those issues that are important to your local residents and things like that.
And it's also, I guess, getting your name out there, isn't it? Like with local council, because one thing that I found with Rockingham and Kwinana, that people aren't very trusting, and if you have, a candidate that comes up like a month or two before an election that no one's heard of before. Then they're like, well, who is this person? But the fact that you're a Rockingham councillor, I think most people in Rockingham know who you are, and so you kind of build up that those touch points, and then when it comes to either state or federal or whatever, then you're starting with your foot forward,
Yeah, look, touch points is a really good way to say that. Actually, it's about having that constant communication and touching base with the locals, like groups like this, and all the people that are sort of in it. But we're circling actually back to where we began on voter apathy, and that's why people, when they pop up a month or two before an election, they ask, "Oh, who's this?" Even if that person has actually been very active in the community, unless you're unless you're looking for it, unless they're in front of you all the time, you don't really know.
Yeah,
and rightly so, people are busy, like they're not clued on to what's going on in behind the scenes in politics, and so they're quite apathetic to that sort of thing. But I mean, local government is a good way to keep your name in the public eye, and it's something that I haven't wasted either. It's not like I've got onto council and I'm just resting on my laurels. I've got maybe an opportunity coming for me down the track. I've been very, very active in keeping busy on council since I got on there. I've sort of been throwing hand grenades.
I can't imagine you kind of just resting on your laurels. It's not something that you do.
I could never do it. No, I could never do it. So I've moved motions and debated fiercely and got a few things over the line and knocked back a few things that needed knocking back. And we've got a lot actually coming up in the back end of this month, which is obviously being live streamed in September. So there'll be a large number of issues for people to watch out for in the September council meeting. So I'd certainly recommend everyone has a look at the agenda on that when it comes out, because there's a lot going on and it interacts with federal government and the state government. We've got, for example, we'll most likely be having a debate around Australia Day on what is the date that we want to hold the local celebrations.
That was
on.
quite controversial.
It was,
so
yeah.
Last year.
And I was behind that as well, of course, but only because I believe so passionately in Australia Day and what that stands for. So that's something that we're interacting with the federal government there. There's obviously AUKUS is a massive one that I'm super passionate about. So
What's happening with AUKUS? So is it a couple of years away still?
Yeah, so we're looking at Surf West, which is, to break that down, is Submarine Rotational Force West. They're arriving in 2027, and that's the American and English sailors will be based out of HMAS Stirling, so 5 minutes from here. They'll be on a rotating force that'll be stationed in Rockingham. So that's obviously all happening at the defence level, and that's outside of the scope.
But that
of local
has
government.
huge impacts to Rockingham, doesn't it? Because at the moment, Rockingham is one of, correct me if I'm wrong, but one of the worst in terms of homelessness, right? So we have we had a huge problem before, but obviously things have escalated.
Yep.
So we have massive issues with homelessness in Rockingham. And then we're having, a lot of defence families which need to be housed in Rockingham. Great for tourism, amazing for house prices and all those, benefits. Do you think we're ready for AUKUS at the moment, though?
Look, I'm going to be very critical here, and I have been on a number of public platforms, but I think particularly the state government needs to pick its heels up out of the dirt and start running. Because from a local government perspective, we are pushing AUKUS and all of the particularly community infrastructure and road infrastructure that needs to be built before 2027. The federal government, they've got access to the pot of money, but it is the state government who's actually going to have to deliver many of the projects that are, unless you're actually talking about on the island itself. Everything else that has to be delivered is more or less from the state government perspective. And I'm in touch with the Defence Industry Minister's officer, Paul Papalia, and I know that he cares very much about this issue. But from a whole of state government perspective, I'm really struggling to see how we can be ready in time for 2027. And we have to be. Let's face it, if we don't stick the landing on this,
It'll be chaos if we're not ready.
Australia and Rockingham would become the laughing stock of the world. This is the actual pillars of AUKUS with the Americans and the English that we're relying on could shatter if we're not ready and we're not prepared. If we're not hitting our milestones and reaching the objective by the time that we get to 100%, we need it. We're stuffed. Let's just be very, very clear. This is alliance breaking or making sort of apathy that we're seeing, particularly from the state government. We need to get on top of this, and there's a few things coming to council in September that are effectively advocacy on this, because we are running out of time.
Is Libby on board with the changes that need to happen? Should the Liberals be elected next year?
I can tell you what, as the architects of the AUKUS agreement, the Liberal Party stands so firmly behind expediting all of the AUKUS-related activity that I can almost guarantee if we had either a change of government or a shift in the attitude of government to we need to get this done by 2027, we could do it. We are behind, but we could do it. But it's like many things. It's not just AUKUS, it's the environment, it's everything. It comes back to political will. You have to have people, a local member, prosecuting the issue with the minister. You have to have a minister who has a real big say at the cabinet table, and you have to have a leader who cares about it enough to sell the vision to the broader society. You need to have at least those three elements on board, and you need to have them working in unison to get these things done. And that's where I'm seeing a communication breakdown, but especially between local and state government. Sir Nick Hine, actually, he's an architect of nuclear submarines over in the UK. And he runs Babcock Australasia. He's put it really, really aptly at a conference last year. He said it's like the wheels are spinning, but we're not in gear. So industry's ready to go, local government's ready to go, defence is so ready to go, but it's all the government and regulation sort of things that need to be addressed. And it's just like there's paperwork piling up on someone's desk. I'd love to know who it is, but yeah, we need to get a move.
Is it an
MP
MP that would be blocking this, or is it like a civil servant?
If it's defence-related things, I suspect it'd probably be the bureaucracy in Canberra from the Department of Defence. But when it comes to the state government stuff, there should be no excuse. It's more about accessing a pot of money, which they can do. They have done it. And having the political will to move on it, and not just we'll leave this for an announcement sometime down the track. There's more important prerogatives at play than politics, and I think that's and I've called for this publicly as well in the West Australian, is put politics aside. We need to have some statesmanship on this and work as a team between local government, state government, federal government, blue, red, purple, yellow. I don't care what colour you are. We need to get along and get this thing done, because this is so important. It's multi-generational. It's something that'll affect my grandchildren, and it's something that I'm passionate about us doing right. And so that's my call to the state government in particular, is work with us on this. Come to the table and let's get AUKUS done, because it is so important.
It is, and it is our future, isn't it? And tourism and all those kind of things. It's really cool. We have run out of time. Mo is outside just waiting to come in.
I'm sure
so
we could go for
wrap
hours
it up
and
there. What is the future? Just one more question. What is the future for you, and how can people engage with you?
The future is not set. The future is not set, but I will say I am here for other people. I'm driven by service, driven by leadership. I always use that term statesmanship, and that is to do what is best for the people and the society, rather than what is easy or politically expedient. And so with that, I'm around. And I can't tell you exactly where I'm going to be 10 years from now, let alone 5 years from now. But what I can say is I'm keen. Yeah. I'm keen on this place. I'm keen on what I do. And I'm very, very passionate about people. The best way that people can reach out to me to speak about, whether it be party affairs, business, defence, mining, whatever area that I'm involved with, council, you can... easiest way to find me is to just type in City of Rockingham Councillors or Councillor Peter Hudson. I'm on Facebook, LinkedIn all the time as well. Shoot me an email. Happy to chat. Whether if you've got a problem or if you've got some positive feedback, is great as well.
Yep.
But even if you just want to chat about what's going on locally, or if there's anything that I can assist with in your life or your patch, then I'd be more than happy to discuss. So yeah, you can get me at cr.hudson, so councillor.hudson at rockingham.wa.gov.au. Sure that's too long for anyone to remember, but just type in City of Rockingham Councillors and we'll all pop up, all 12 of us there. And I'm only too happy to take phone calls. My mobile's there as well. And to reach out to any of you and have great chats about anything that I may be able to assist with.
Awesome. Okay, well, obviously we will be seeing you again over the next 6 months, so we're looking forward to that. But yeah, thank you for coming in today. We really appreciate it. We're going to go to a song now. This is Madonna, Material Girl, and we'll be back with Mo after this.